twisted through 7 suns of gold, and the gypsy was insisting that his story must
Hello,
be
everybody,
told.
and welcome back to the 200th episode of the Soberful podcast. I'm Veronica Valley.
And I'm Chip Summers.
Can you believe it?
No, I can't. I mean, I think I said this when we did the 100th episode or something, but, you know, when you first suggested doing this, I thought it was going to be about 5 or 10 episodes and that would be it. And, and here we are 200 episodes later. It's fantastic. It's something I'm sure you are. I'm very proud of it. And I'm always suggesting it to people, and people seem to like it still. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought the same. I thought people would figure out pretty quickly we didn't have a clue what we were doing, and nobody seems to have cottoned on to that quite yet.
They haven't tweaked it yet. Yeah.
So let's crack on. Oh my goodness, yeah. It's been I can't believe it's a lot. It's about 4.5 years.
I know, that's also something that is a little bit alarming, how much time has gone since we first started, because it feels like, if somebody had asked me how long has it been going, I'd have probably said, about a couple of years.
Yeah.
You know.
We were young.
I think
we were young when this started.
We were. No, I wasn't. You were. I was
you
never
were
young.
16.
I was... No, just 70. Just 70.
No, I remember you were 69 because I remember
you
were talking about you. Yeah, I remember you were talking about the birthday party that Heidi organised. So you were 69. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
So we want to do something special. We wanted to do another Ask Us Anything, but literally ask us anything you've wanted to ask us. So we asked the Facebook group and the Soberful Life members.
Oh, good. Okay.
What they wanted to ask us. So I'm going to kick off with this question. It's from Rebecca, who is in Soberful Life.
Yeah.
What are your favorite things about long-term recovery? What are the things that year 10, 20, year 30 you could see, feel, experience differently compared to early sobriety? Or more simply, how has your perspective shifted as the sober years clock up? That's interesting. Because, 10, 20 years is, I don't have 30 yet, but you do. Yeah. What are the things that... you take it back to that.
I jotted down stability. I've got a very, very stable life. I can make it unstable if I spend too much money on things, but in principle, it's very stable life. And I think that's when I think back to 10 years, 20 years, that's something that's proportionately increased the longer I've been sober. Positivity. I'm definitely much more positive and much more able to laugh at myself. But also, I think, trust in my resilience to deal with things. I think that has been really fundamental to me. It's like, I do know that I can deal with anything that life throws at me. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to deal with it without drinking. You know, I know that's never a given, but I'm pretty sure I could deal with that. And that gives me the ability, because I'm not fretting about that and worrying about that, it gives me the ability to try things, take risks, enjoy life a bit more, and do things. So I think just a general feeling of stability and trust in my ability to deal with things has been one of the things for me.
Yeah, I would second that. That's my answer too, is the stability. I always felt like a little boat on the ocean without a rudder, that the elements were just sort of, I didn't know where I was going to end up or what was going to happen. And I also not having any plan. Like my plan was what we're doing this weekend. So it's the stability, and it's a bit, what it feels like is being anchored. You know, in 20 years I've moved, you know, I got sober in America, moved back to England, met an American, moved back to America, moved several times in America, had children, you know, had some ups and downs, all of that kind of stuff. But I have never felt unanchored or that I could potentially capsize the way that I always felt before that. I've even like the tough things. I think the hardest thing I've been through is when my youngest son was lead poisoned. That was probably the hardest thing I've been through.
Right. Yeah.
Even though that was awful, it's that feeling of being anchored, of being just knowing that I can get through. I do feel I can get through anything.
Sure. Because, I mean, when I think back, I was always so frightened of something going wrong because I knew I wouldn't be able to cope. It would overwhelm me. And I don't think, things, I get overwhelmed. I do get sort of too much work, or I get tired or a bit stressed and things. But in principle, I don't feel emotionally overwhelmed by things. I feel I'm much more in control of that sort of situation. So, and I know that, and I also know that whatever happens, I'll be all right. I'll be able to carry on being all right. Yeah, it's just that kind of, it's really a level of confidence and stability I never thought I would have. And it's a fantastic feeling. Yeah, lovely.
The other thing is that I've never, my gratitude only continues to deepen. Like I've never, and I know it's the same for you, I've never felt like I don't take any of this for granted. I was at a wedding last weekend, and it was a beautiful wedding, and there was an open bar, and people were drinking, but no, I don't think anyone was like out of control. But I'm still like, I still have a moment where I'm like, I'm so glad I don't drink. I'm so glad. There was one lovely guy who kind of told me the same story 3 times. I'm just like, I'm so glad that I don't behave like that. And I'm so glad I'm going to wake up tomorrow feeling pretty great with sore feet from dancing. That's all. And that's never gone away. Like I've never, I look at, my husband and I quite often will be in a social situation with people drinking, and we will say to each other, I'm so glad we don't drink. So we're having such a great time. I'm so glad. Right. I did that deepens, I think.
Well, it certainly does for me. I mean, I know there's never been a morning when I've woken up and haven't thought, oh, great, I've got another day at it. I haven't been whisked away in the middle of the night. I've got another day at this great thing called life. Yeah.
And just also a genuine, like my friendships. The friendships that I have with some of my girlfriends that I've known before I got sober have just deepened, and the people I've met since getting sober, that the genuine, like, friendships that are decades long now. And I was a very much a burn your bridges kind of person. Really, really, I just appreciate that the more I'm sober.
A friend of mine posted on Facebook just a few days ago, actually, a photograph of myself, a friend called Kevin, who's got clean the same day as me, and 2 other people. And that was 37 years ago, and we're still all friends today. It's lovely.
Priceless, isn't it? Priceless.
Love it. Love it.
Okay, so this is a question from Amita. Why do sober people always celebrate number of days of sobriety? To me, that suggests an endurance and feels at odds with the idea that life without alcohol is freeing and empowering. And we did do an episode on this, actually, why we count days.
Yeah, we did.
We'll try and put it in the show notes. It was, I don't know, can't remember. It was a while ago.
Yeah.
But why? So the reason is, Amita, for me, there's a very, very, very clear before and after. So I honestly could not give a toss about my belly button birthday. I've got a big one coming up in January with a 0 at the end of it. And I might probably do something with my family to mark that. But honestly, I could not care less. I would rather, I think once you get past, I don't know, maybe 30 or maybe 40, I'm like, my kids who, when you have kids, birthdays are the best thing ever. They want to celebrate it. But I'm like, but my sober birthday, I want to shout it from the rooftops, because it's such an achievement. And it's a clear, my life really got going from that day forward. And I also think the other thing is, I think that you guys, although, we this is a very broad highway, and we believe in putting weight on the sober end, and, there's lots of stop starts, and we support everyone in that. I think you guys would want to know if we had a drink last week or not.
Yeah. Yes, right? I think, yeah. And I'm, I'm coming up for, I agree with you completely. My clean time birthday is far more important to me than my belly button birthday. Yeah. And I'm coming up for one in 4 weeks' time. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of it. And I was proud of getting 60 days. I was proud of getting 90 days. I was proud of getting a year. And I don't think there's anything wrong in being. I don't want to count days in a detrimental way, but at the same time, I don't want to deny the fact I've achieved something. I've achieved something that I'm proud of, and I want to recognize it. I don't want to bang on about it to people and go, "Oh well, I've got more clean time than you have," and that's not a productive way of doing it. But for myself, I'm super proud of it, and I think it can be used in a sort of slightly put downing. I mean, I've definitely heard people say, "Oh well, when you get to be as clean as me, you might understand." I've heard that said to me, but I think that's a bad use of day counting. But I think for me, every day I stay clean, I'm proud, and I'm proud of accumulating time, and I hope I don't show it off. But personally, internally, I'm very, very proud of what I've achieved.
Yeah, and I think I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I'm proud of it because I did this, and I went to the brink, and I put in a lot of frickin' effort. Mm-hmm. None of this was luck. None of this was given to me. I did this through my sheer guts and determination and sweat and blood, and so that's why, and it's because of that I do have I feel empowered and free. So I think what maybe Amita's referring to is like when you're in the sort of first year and maybe you count days, you get to 45 and then you drink again. I mean, I would just maybe not worry about it too much in the first year, but once that scale tips and you feel like you're living in the land of sobriety, you do want to, because it just does feels like a momentous achievement, and it is.
No, I think so. I think it's how you use it.
Okay, so there's a question from Amanda. You have a lot of years under your belt of sobriety, which is amazing, by the way, and I think you are both incredible. Thank you, Amanda. We love you.
I'm glad she said both.
Do you feel to achieve the lifelong sobriety, AA is a must or important? It's something I toss around, and all the people I respect and admire are members of AA. I just wonder, will I miss a growth opportunity, etc.?
Do you know, I had this conversation with somebody this morning. When I first got sober, clean, there was only AA. There was nothing else in terms of support groups or anything like that. There was nothing else. That was the only show in town. Then NA came along, which fitted my brand of addiction much better. That was very, very new. When I got clean, it was about 2 years old in the UK. And so for quite a long time, there was only AA and NA. That was it. Or there was the church. Some people went to the church. But outside of that, there was nothing else. Things have changed a lot in the last 20, 25 years. Things like SMART has come along, that came along, and that was an alternative way of getting connection with people and getting a sort of community going. But now, I mean, it's exploded in the last, whatever, and there's loads of nothing. There's Soberful, there's Soberistas, there's Sober this, and
Smart
Sober
recovery,
that, Smart
recovery.
Yeah, there's so many, and it's really possible to, but they all share one thing, and that's connecting with other people. And so I think, I owe my kind of recovery to NA and AA in particular, because they were the only things that were around when I got sober and clean. So I feel very fondly towards them, but I also really like all the new things that are coming along and giving people loads of alternatives and choice, and I think that's great, and I think it's a wonderful thing. And I noticed in England there's another one started about 4 weeks ago called Dry or something, with 2 Ys, and that looks really good. And I think there's just so much more choice now, but I will always tip my hat to AA and NA, because that was what helped me when I first got around. For people coming around now, it may be different, but I think I am respectful towards them because they were there when I wanted that help, and they provided that help for me. But I think the thing that they all provide is community, and there's a lot of choice now, which there wasn't at the beginning.
I would agree with that more or less. I think that there is a lot of choice now, and I think that's great. I'm the same. I got sober in 2000. There wasn't anything else, and the internet wasn't a thing. So I think, first of all, I want to say I think AA is very much misunderstood what the program is and what the program isn't. And that's why I wrote, there's a post on my website, it's on veronicavalley.com, called The Misinformation of Alcoholics Anonymous, that hopefully will clarify what the program is. I do think there is a lot of wishy-washy meetings, and I can understand why people would go to them and not find it very attractive, because I don't really feel there's great examples of what the program can do. I think that it doesn't really matter which program you're in, but there's a couple of key things. There is the connection, and community is vital in our opinion and experience. I think we're agreeing on that. I also think you need more than that. I think it needs to contain some tools where you can self-reflect on your behavior and your feelings, and find a way to understand yourself better and deal with feelings better. I think that they need to contain service beyond self as well, where you are doing service in a way that's not for Instagram likes or money, that's just service. And I think that they all need to contain an element of, being there for people, new people coming in. I think what I see is lots of people do the next shiny object. And I think the most important thing is pick something and stick with it, no matter what. Stick with it. Whether it's, and I love Women for Sobriety. I think that's a lovely program. I think Smart Recovery's helped a lot of people. I have a couple clients doing the Recovery Dharma, the Buddhist program. I don't think it really matters. I think it needs to have those elements. It needs to have the self-reflection and service and all that. But the whole point is staying with it. Not doing it for 6 months, feeling, I feel much better now, thanks, bye. That's, I feel, theft. Stick with it and keep doing it.
I think I agree completely. I think there's something about connection which is incredibly important. I think having knowledge and experience of people who've gone before you and being able to tap into that is also important. And that wouldn't matter what sort of group you joined. I do think there is a danger of AA and NA not catching up with the times, and not, I've banged on about it, and you've got your thing. I think we did an episode on CHIP Simple Steps, which is again trying to get the program up to date, which I think is going to be the downfall of if they don't bring themselves up to date and realize that things are changing very dramatically. But I also think one people need to be careful about is that there are so many choices now, and a lot of those choices allow you to sit in your bedroom and feel that you're very connected to people, but you're not actually connected with people. Zoom and all those other platforms that enable people to kind of see other people, and a lot of people in Soberful have done that, but those people have also connected with each other. And I think that would be the only thing I would be a little bit cautious about, is if you're going to use these new things, which are fantastic and helpful, don't just sit in your house and not actually physically connect with people. I think wherever you can, try and physically connect with people, because it makes a big difference.
Yeah, my understanding of the 12-step program is that it's ancient spiritual wisdom that's been passed down through several thousand years and sort of shaped to fit alcoholics. And that's why I love it so much. But Chip and I both work the program, I think, we approach it in different ways. Completely Chip's an atheist. I believe in God. Chip prefers NA, I prefer AA, yet here we are. So it's a quite, broad, I think. So I think our gist is, no, AA is not essential, but being part of a program is. Pick one and stay with it. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, here's a question from Kim. I know
Kim.
You know Kim? Kim P?
Well, I know a Kim, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of Kims.
Not in Soberful, they're not.
Okay, Kim P. I once heard you mention on a podcast that when you work with clients, some of them will rationalize their drinking and second guess or question the advice you provide by doing mental gymnastics and are more challenging to convince that sobriety is beneficial and can be accomplished by doing X, Y, and Z. How do you convince those people, maybe I'm one of them, and eventually get them to stop resisting?
Oh God, this does come up a lot. It's come up with a client this week. He's twisting himself in knots trying to prove to me why he hasn't got a problem, even though his medical evidence is screaming that he's got a problem. His facial features are screaming that he's got a problem. His behavior is screaming that he's got a problem, but he is twisting himself into knots. I think I've changed my approach over the years. I think at the beginning I'd get terribly kind of caught up in trying to change somebody's view. I think now I tend to go, well, this is what happens to a lot of people. You could maybe look at it another way. Maybe be a little bit more sort of directive than I might have been in the past, saying, well, why are you here? If you haven't got a problem, why are you sitting in front of me? And being maybe a little bit more challenging, perhaps. But people, I've got a lot better at going, well, I've given you all the information I can. If you don't want to listen to that, or you don't want to hear that, maybe not, if you don't want to hear that, I can't do anything about that. I'll be here in a year's time when you come back again. That's a bit arrogant saying that, but but I've got much better at kind of going, okay, I'm going to give you all the information I know. I'm going to give you my years of experience. You can decide whether you want to listen to it or not. And I hope you do. But people do. I mean, I tied myself up into knots. Why I didn't have a problem, why it wasn't as bad as other people's. Other people were worse than me, and they did this and they did that, but I didn't. It took people to being quite direct with me to help me with that. But I've got better at kind of going, okay, I've done my very best with this person to show them the experience of my years of work. If you don't want to listen to it, that's your privilege.
Yeah, I think we're both at the point really in our careers where we don't work with people who don't want to get help, really. I mean,
yeah.
When we were, certainly when we worked in rehab, you would have people who were there because family or courts had said you need to be there, but absolutely didn't want to be there. And sometimes you could have a breakthrough with them. Sometimes you could.
Yeah.
And there's so many people who really do want to change and want to help that I only really work with those people. But here's what I do. In rehab, we used to give them a step one. I call it the true cost of drinking. And I just get people to have a really solid look at what their drinking costs them. So how much money, have you spent? We go through all of that. We do a guesstimate of how much money they've spent over their lifetime, which is usually considerable. But what really gets them is time. How much time have they spent drinking, being hungover, missing out on things? And then you look at how has it impacted relationships, opportunities, job. And the big one to me is what's the cost to your dignity or your integrity? Yeah. And when you take someone through that exercise, that has sometimes been the most effective tool because it's right there. And then I always say to them, if you want to drink and you're prepared to pay this cost, crack on. Yeah. Now, no, the cost never goes away. It only increases over years. But if you're all right with that, crack on, mate. I've got no, off you go. Yep. And that's when people kind of do the, and that it's the cold reality of their perception of what they think their drinking's like. In their heads, they think they're like, it's just a fabulous time compared to the cold, stark reality of it. That is the best tool that I have.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely my approach has also changed. When I was working in rehab, you have a kind of responsibility to take people who perhaps, as you say, might be unwilling. you have a responsibility to try and change that and to try and help them find, the truth of what's going on. That's what you're there for. Now I'm in private practice. I mean, I will say to people who come to me, look, if you're coming to me with a problem, let's talk about getting you into a rehab somewhere where you can deal with that. If you want to come here drunk every week, I'm not interested. If you want my help getting into rehab, fine, I'll do that. But I don't want you coming up here every week getting drunk, talking about what you're going to, I want to work on the deeper stuff now. And the more, to me, and that tends to be what my clients are now, people who really who've got sober and who really want to do the kind of deep work that's going to help them get better.
Yeah, and I want to say definitely we've had success with people who've absolutely don't think they have a problem and not wanted to be in rehab. And it's what we do is a process of revealing themselves to we reveal stuff with the dark arts of psychotherapy in a way that they can't not see that, what's really going on. And sometimes it takes people several goes around, but often, sometimes you're planting a seed.
Yeah. I mean, and I think so much of the work in rehab is done by the other patients and clients, whatever you call them, because suddenly they're confronted with people who are just like them, and they thought they were somehow special and different. And I think seeing other people, I mean, that was amazing to me, to be in a room filled with people who had done the same sort of things as I'd done. I couldn't believe it, and
we think we're so original.
I know.
But revealing that you're not remotely original, like that's a big kind of punch. Is when I absolutely thought I was the only person who felt this way. I absolutely thought nobody felt the same way I did. And when you're sort of shown a room full of people who all think and feel the same, you're kind of like, oh. I'm so unoriginal.
Very unoriginal and incredibly predictable as well. Oh my God. I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, this is a generalization, I know, but I can sort of, okay, somebody comes along, okay, that's your shit. Okay, I know where this is going, and I can almost plot it out. And we are horribly predictable at times, and that's where it's important for you me or whoever it is to take a compassionate view, and it's scary getting into recovery. It is scary, but our job is to try and make it less scary, I hope.
Quick question from Diane in Australia. Love to Diane.
Oh, I know Diane, yes. Yeah, we met Diane in London.
We love her. Yep. We love her. Are you and Chip ever planning to visit us here in Australia? And I said, do you have a spare room? She said yes.
Did she? I've got, one
have
of my old girlfriends.
I've never been. I'd love to go.
Oh, I've been. I went to one of the greatest loves of my life got done for importing cannabis into Sydney, and I had to go and visit her before she got a 6-year sentence. But I'm still friends with her. She came back to England. She was my neighbour when I was young. She's somebody that's been part of my life all my life, and she was a great love. So I have got places to stay, but it's bloody miles away. It's miles away.
So the answer is, in theory, yes.
In theory,
How
yes.
is like a whole other thing. But it's on my bucket list. I'd love to go.
Oh, I've been, and I'm glad I went. And if the Soberful community wish to put a fund together to get us out there, I'm sure we'll be only too pleased to go out there. Yeah.
So this is a question from I think it's a Facebook group from Paul. What is your favourite thing about each other?
Oh.
Chip's speechless.
Oh.
Okay, I'll answer it. I think through all the years, your sense of humour, you really have made me laugh. I mean, like, I remember so many times in the Focus office where we've just got, I like, you have that very, and maybe more so now I'm in America, like that incredibly dry British sense of humour that I just have always loved. So probably your sense of humour, and also definitely, I would say actually on top before that would be, oh no, there's more. Okay, I've got 2 more things. One more would be your unrelenting compassion towards the suffering addict or alcoholic, like compassion without end to someone who's in a really dark space. And the last thing is just your commitment to just your commitment to this work and helping people, that it just no matter what place people are in, or treating them the same, doesn't matter whether they're a banker or a homeless person. I've always admired that. You've got a real ability that's very interesting to, I've seen you with the street addicts and then look at you and see a librarian and within 30 seconds be like, he's one of us. He gets it. He gets what it's like looking to smack, but also being able to speak to the barrister.
Yeah.
And that's quite a skill.
Thank you. I have always admired your drive, and that drive has been to really spread the word of recovery. And that was, I remember our first lunch together. We went to that very nice restaurant in Bury St Edmunds, and you've always been very driven about finding ways of spreading the message. And this podcast has been a real example of that, of how you have really committed yourself to kind of trying to get this message across to as many people as possible. And I also really admire your commitment to your children and the way that you have really trying so hard and doing it, I'm sure, to break the generational sort of processes that have gone on in your family. But the way you go to such lengths to make sure your children are emotionally articulate and rounded children, in a world when children are just becoming so disconnected from their emotions and they're just hooked on their iPhones, as we are as adults as well. But it's going to be more damaging to children if they do that. And I think the fact that you've tried to retain that family environment is something I've admired that greatly. So that would be mine.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's really nice to hear. That was a great question.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay. We still have time for more, so I'll just crack on with them.
Okay.
Sarah has asked, how long does it take sobriety to feel positive and helpful to you? I've done many months, etc., and even 12 months, but never felt a change physically or mentally.
Oh, that's bad luck.
Well, I would say, so reading that, so I'm going to just sort of jump to some conclusions. So again, we've done a podcast episode on this, that the first year is very, very different. And I think that's probably the biggest landmine in the sobriety progress, is the first year is so unique and probably the most challenging, and that people think that's how it is. And because it's such a massive lifestyle shift, and it's such a top to bottom change, that and it can feel very difficult and challenging, and it can feel lonely and boring, and it can feel like you're missing out in those first few months, that people assume that's how it's going to be for the next few decades, and it isn't. So there's that. The first 12 months are very, very unique to the sobriety process, but also I think the quality of it is about what you're doing. If you're just not drinking, I imagine that it's probably not going to be great. My experience has been, Chip, that the further you get away from a drink, if you don't have some kind of emotional internal change, the worse it gets.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think things get worse in sobriety if all you do is not drink, but you're not doing any work on yourself to facilitate an internal, to understand yourself, to reveal yourself to yourself, to understand your emotions, to do the work that we talk about in pretty much every single episode. I think that things get worse. And I have seen lots of people several years of sobriety who all they've done is not drinking. Yeah. And I don't find it attractive.
No, there's a reason there's that phrase "dry drunk" has become established, because those are people who have just stopped drinking, but have made no internal changes at all, not bothered to change their attitude to things. And I think, I think, I do things now that if you had told me in my first year I would be doing, I would have said, forget it. That's just not possible. I mean, and that's been something that has continually happened. I have kept on achieving things I thought were impossible for me to achieve. So at the beginning, it was going a week clean. That was, I can't possibly do that. Then it was, okay, now I've spoken in front of 20 people. That was impossible for me to do. And throughout the whole of my recovery, it's been a constant achieving things I absolutely knew for sure I wouldn't be able to achieve. But it did require patience. And funnily enough, I said to a client the other day, who he'd come to me and he said, I'm 30 days, I'm 60 days, I'm 90 days, and now he's got to about a year. And I said to him the other day, well, okay, that's the hardest bit out of the way now. And he went, well, you might have told me that at the beginning. And I said, if I told you that at the beginning, you wouldn't have stuck it out. But yeah, I do think the first year is the hardest. And I do think that significantly things change for the better, but it's bloody hard. I mean, people forget, most of us are trying to change 14, 15, 20 years of behavior. You're not going to do that in 14 or 15 days or 40, it takes time
14 or 15
to make
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
there's going to be tons of childhood stuff that
comes up.
and so, and I think that it's, if you don't feel you're getting there, it's this word again, it's consistency. Pick a program and stick with it. Keep doing it. The only reason we are where we are is because of that. And we have done it messily, imperfectly. We have fucked up more times than please know that you have messed up on so many occasions in our recovery in our life. But we have consistently worked for us, our 12-step program. I have consistently done that. Yep. And that's that. If you're not having, if this is not feeling like it's different, then I think that's the answer. I also want to say that I think sometimes what happens when we get sober a few months down the line is some people have some undiagnosed mental health problems that the addiction was masking. And you can't really treat that or work with that until you're sort of got several months under your belt of not interfering with your brain chemistry. And then sometimes people then need to have, maybe it's clinical depression or ADHD or all sorts of bipolar that then needs treating for them to feel more stable. Does that make sense?
It does completely. And alcohol is a depressant. And but I also think that, if recovery and sobriety isn't enjoyable and better, then you're probably not going to stick around. And if you're finding that after a year or two it isn't enjoyable, that may be something you need to look at, because there's plenty in the world to enjoy. There's plenty in the world that's very messed up and very damaged and things, but there's a lot of things in the world to enjoy and a lot of connections to make that can be really heartwarming and wonderful. And I think they're not going to come, the fun police aren't going to come knocking on your door saying, oh, look, I need, you have to go out and take those little risks of going off in groups and going for a picnic and going for a dance or whatever it is. You've got to take those little risks. And I think that one of the things that I'm always banging on about and have done often in this podcast is that if you don't take risks, you're not going to grow. And you have to, the more you risk, the more pleasure and enjoyment and growth you will get in your life. And it could be risks of having fun. It could be risks of revealing something from your past and dealing with it. It could be, but if you don't have that ability to take risks, you're going to be very stagnant.
So time for, I think, at least one or two more. Esther has asked, do you think alcoholism is in the genes or hereditary?
Bit of both. there's lots more evidence now that we are able now to actually look inside the brain, whereas when I first started work, most mental health was pure guesswork. Whereas oh yes, you've got a depleted serotonin levels. Have I now? How did you work that out just by looking at me? But nowadays there is wonderful science going on about looking at, and actually I might put a link up to a Swedish lecture that I heard recently about how much evidence they're finding about the genetic propensity towards alcohol dependency. But I think it's, there are so many factors. If you're brought up by two alcoholic parents, the chances are that you're going to be having a pretty dysfunctional childhood, which could in itself then lend itself to you wanting to deal with that dysfunction with alcohol. It's been what you've been role modeled. I think it's a lot of things. I think it's genetics. I think it's environment. I think it's parenting. I think it's a combination of many things, but there's no doubt about it that genetics are, I think this lecture that I watched said something like 73% increase in the chances of you becoming alcohol dependent if your parents were.
Yeah, my husband's mother died of alcoholism when he was 8, and he was raised in a very chaotic alcoholic home, and neither he nor his brother have addiction issues, but there were certainly issues as a result of being raised by a mother who was emotionally unavailable. I personally think environment is the heavier influence. I think if you grew up in an environment where alcohol abuse was and drinking just in general was normalized, I think that's a more obvious prediction. But it's a soup, right? It can be. There's so many different factors.
Yeah, that's definitely not a financial environment either. Wealth does not protect you from dysfunction and trauma, not in the slightest. In fact, some of the most traumatic experiences I've listened to as a therapist have been behind extremely expensive front doors. But I do think you're right. I think environment, the way you're brought up as a child, makes a big difference. Big difference. But there is evidence growing. I think we're going to, but you see, then we get the problem is, as we delve deeper into all kinds of genetics. I mean, genetics is now, an incredibly important part of science. People are finding out genetic things about asthma, genetic things about all kinds of things. And I'm sure there will come a time when they can identify, let's say, for want of a better label, an alcohol-dependent gene. And you can test children at birth for all these things. Great, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, ban alcohol.
You're going to, or are you going to give that child that information at the appropriate age? Look, you've got this gene, and you need to avoid such and such. Same as if they discovered you had a peanut allergy, and they'll be able, I think it's a question of, you could still have all that knowledge, but still be brought up in a terrible environment, and it would be very difficult.
I mean, we talk about it with my kids, and we're not quite at this point yet, but I think I've actually said, we have had this conversation with my eldest son that he will have more risk because of me and his grandmother on his father's side, that his risk of developing addiction issues is higher than some of his friends, and that's a factor he has to consider. So he is going to have that information and know that. It's just kind of understanding that he does have a higher risk, but again, there's so many other factors, and I'm hoping that how we parent will be a preventative factor.
Exactly. Yeah.
To that.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
So I think we'll wrap it up there. We got through a lot of questions.
We did.
How do you feel about our 200th episode?
I feel very proud. I feel I love this podcast. I think it's. I'm actually surprised how many people come to me and not through Soberful, but they say, "Oh yeah, I've been listening to the podcast." And
have you been recognised? I've been recognised. It happened once. Have you been recognised?
No.
Really?
No. No.
In a meeting?
Oh, in a meeting, yeah. But then, yeah, funnily enough, I went to a meeting in London the other day and I knew nobody in the room at all. Absolutely nobody. And there was a part of me that was wanting to go, do you know who I am? You got any idea who is sitting amongst you? But no, nobody recognised me.
The one time it happened was in Lake Tahoe, and we were going. It was about, I think it was maybe a year ago. We were, or maybe it was, I don't know. Anyway, we were going, like, there's a bike ride we were doing, and I was chatting away to my husband, and there was this woman who was about 30 with her father ahead of us, and she turned around and said, "Excuse me, are you Veronica from the Soberful podcast?" And I went, "Yeah." So I thought it was you. I heard your accent. I was like, "Oh my God." And we took a photo, and that's the one and only time.
Wow. But then, yeah,
and my kids were like amazed.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So, we live in hope.
We live in hope. I mean, the trouble is, it's a very audio thing. It's not a visual thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose in America, my accent stands out more.
Yeah,
so.
no, exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you, our lovely listeners, for
absolutely.
I mean, because we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't. If you don't listen to it, we wouldn't have got this far if people didn't respond and like the show. If you get a chance, please give us a quick rating on whatever app you listen to. It really helps the show get noticed. Give us a review if you can, and follow us on whatever platform that you listen to, and it will let you know when there's a new episode. We have got lots of great new episodes coming up, and interviews and all of that kind of stuff, and we're going to just keep going because we still have stuff to talk about and we love doing this. But we want to thank you. We want to thank our lovely listeners and people who recommend the show and post it on Facebook groups and in other platforms and have told people, that has helped us so much. So thank you for everybody who's listened over the years. We really appreciate it.
Indeed we do. Thank you so much. I didn't think anybody would ever listen to me, but now I do know. So thank you.
Well, you've had 1 million downloads, so that's
exactly. So that's for a person who wasn't listened to as a child. That's important stuff. Yes.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.